Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it, then let's evaluate together. The neon sign of Houston's prime steakhouse glowed against the dark Texas sky, casting a warm amber hue over the wet pavement. It was a chilly December night in Houston, the kind where the wind bit at your knuckles and the air smelled faintly of rain and exhaust. Inside, the place buzzed with the low hum of wealth. Crystal chandeliers twinkled overhead, the scent of sizzling ribeyes wafted from the open kitchen, and the clink of wine glasses punctuated the chatter of oil barons and tech moguls. The waitstaff moved like shadows, smooth and silent, balancing trays of $50 steaks and $100 bottles of Bordeaux. At the center of it all, a man stumbled through the double doors, his presence loud enough to cut through the polished ambiance like a jackhammer through concrete. Mason "Mace" Caldwell was a wreck. At 45, he still had the kind of looks that turned heads, rugged jawline, piercing green eyes, and a body that held onto muscle despite years of abuse. But tonight, he was a mess of contradictions. A tailored Armani suit wrinkled and unbuttoned, a Rolex glinting on his wrist next to a smear of what might have been lipstick or ketchup, and a mop of dark hair sticking to his forehead with sweat. He reeked of whiskey and Creed Aventus, a cologne that cost more per ounce than most people's rent. His gait was unsteady, one hand gripping the edge of a hostess stand as he barked, "Table! Now! The good one by the window!" The hostess, a petite blonde with a tight smile, didn't flinch. She'd seen Mace before. Hell, half of Houston had. He was the tabloid king, the Caldwell heir who'd turned a billion-dollar real estate empire into his personal playground. She nodded and led him to the VIP booth, a curved leather seat with a view of the downtown skyline, twinkling like a constellation of dollar signs. Mace flopped down, legs sprawled, and waved a hand. "Whiskey, top shelf. And make it quick, darlin'." Across the room, Talia Brooks watched him from behind the bar. She was wiping down a glass, her movements precise, almost meditative. At 28, Talia was a vision. Skin like polished mahogany, eyes dark and sharp as obsidian, and a body that filled out her black uniform in a way that made it look more like a cocktail dress than a server's getup. Her hair was pulled into a high ponytail, a cascade of tight curls that bounced when she moved. On her left wrist, a small tattoo of a phoenix stretched its wings, the ink faded but bold, a quiet rebellion against the grind of her life. She'd been at Houston's prime for 2 years, slinging plates and pouring drinks to pay for med school and her mom's hospital bills. Guys like Mace were a dime a dozen here, rich, loud, and entitled. She didn't bat an eye. "Yo, T," Darius Miles called from the kitchen pass, leaning out with a grin. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a fade haircut and a dimple that made him a favorite among the female regulars. "You got the drunk asshole at table 12. Good luck, girl." He chuckled, tossing a rag over his shoulder. Talia smirked, setting the glass down. "Ain't my first rodeo, D. I'll handle him." She grabbed a bottle of Macallan 18 from the top shelf, poured a generous double into a tumbler, and headed over. Her hips swayed just enough to draw eyes, but her posture was all business, shoulders back, chin up, like she owned the damn place. Mace looked up as she approached, his bleary gaze sharpening. He took her in slow, from the curve of her calves in those black heels to the way her apron hugged her waist. A lazy grin spread across his face, the kind that had charmed countless women into his bed, or his Bentley. "Well, damn," he drawled, voice rough with booze. "They don't make waitresses like you back in my day." Talia set the whiskey down with a soft clink, her fingers brushing the table just long enough to steady it. "Here's your drink," she said, tone flat but smooth, like honey over steel. "Anything else?" Mace leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on hers. Yeah. How about your number, sweetheart? Or maybe you can join me after your shift. I tip real good. He winked, reaching for the glass and nearly knocking it over. His hand shot out to catch it, sloshing amber liquid onto the pristine tablecloth. Talia didn't flinch. She crossed her arms, tilting her head so her ponytail swung behind her. "I don't serve that kind of meat, big shot," she said, her voice low and cutting. "Enjoy your whiskey." The words hit Mace like a slap, but instead of pissing him off, they lit something up inside him. He laughed, a loud, raspy sound that turned a few heads. "Oh, I like you," he said, pointing a finger at her. "You got balls, huh? What's your name?" "Talia," she said, already turning to walk away. "And keep it down. Some folks here actually want to eat." He watched her go, the sway of her hips hypnotic even through the haze of liquor. His heart thudded hard against his ribs, a jolt he hadn't felt in years, not since the last time he'd chased a high that wasn't bottled or snorted. "Talia," he muttered to himself, rolling the name around like a sip of that Macallan. He downed the whiskey in one gulp, the burn grounding him for a split second before the buzz took over again. The night wore on, and Mace stayed put, ordering another round, then another. He didn't eat, just drank, his eyes tracking Talia as she moved through the room. She was good at her job, smooth with the regulars, quick with a smile for the old couples, firm but polite with the handsy drunks. Every time she passed his table, he'd toss out a line. "You sure you don't want to sit, Talia?" Or, "Bet I could make your night more fun than this gig." She'd roll her eyes or shoot back something sharp. "Keep dreaming, cowboy." But there was a flicker in her gaze, a spark that kept him hooked. Around 11, the crowd thinned out. The kitchen slowed, and the jazz playing over the speakers felt heavier, sultrier. Mace was on his fifth drink, slouched back in the booth, when Talia came by to clear his empty glasses. He caught her wrist as she reached for one, his grip loose but warm. "Come on, Talia," he slurred, voice dropping low. "One drink with me, off the clock. What's it gonna hurt?" She froze, looking down at his hand, then up at his face. Those green eyes were bloodshot but piercing, and for a second, she saw something behind the cocky mask, something raw, almost desperate. She pulled her wrist free, slow and deliberate. "I don't drink with customers," she said, her tone softer than before but still firm. "Especially not ones who can't hold their liquor." He smirked, leaning closer. "I can hold a lot more than liquor, baby. You'd be surprised." Talia stepped back, crossing her arms again. "Yeah? Surprise me by paying your tab and getting out of here before you pass out." She turned on her heel, leaving him chuckling into his glass. But Mace wasn't done. He stumbled to his feet, tossing a stack of hundreds on the table, way more than the bill, and followed her toward the bar. "Hey, Talia, wait up," he called, loud enough to make Darius peek out from the kitchen. She stopped, sighing, and turned around. "What now?" she asked, hands on her hips. He grinned, swaying slightly. "You ever think about getting out of this place? I could set you up, you know. Nice apartment, car, whatever you want. A girl like you shouldn't be wasting her time here." Talia's jaw tightened. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the faint jasmine of her perfume. "Listen up, Mace Caldwell," she said, her voice a quiet storm. "I don't need your money or your pity. I'm here 'cause I choose to be. So take your drunk ass home before I call security." The name drop hit him like a punch. "You know who I am?" he asked, blinking. "Whole damn city knows who you are," she shot back. "Doesn't mean I give a shit." Darius stepped out then, wiping his hands on a towel. "Everything good, T?" he asked, eyeing Mace like he was sizing up a punching bag. "Yeah, D," she said, not breaking eye contact with Mace. "He's leaving." Mace held her gaze for a long moment, the room spinning around him. Then he laughed again, softer this time, and raised his hands in surrender. All right, I'm gone. But I'll be back, Talia. You're too good to forget." He staggered out into the night, the cold air slapping his face as the door swung shut behind him. Inside, Talia shook her head, muttering, "Rich assholes," as she pocketed the cash he'd left. But her pulse was racing, and she couldn't shake the heat of his hand on her wrist, or the way his eyes had stripped her bare without touching her. Outside, Mace leaned against his black Bentley, the Houston skyline blurring into a kaleidoscope of lights. He lit a cigarette, the flame trembling in his shaky fingers, and took a long drag. "Talia," he said again, exhaling smoke into the dark. He didn't know why, but she'd gotten under his skin. Deep, like a splinter he couldn't pull out. He'd spent years chasing highs, women, anything to fill the void. But nothing had ever made his heart kick like that. Not the coke, not the penthouse parties, not even the millions piling up in his bank account. Back inside, Talia clocked out at midnight, peeling off her apron and slipping into a worn denim jacket. Darius walked her to her beat-up Honda in the parking lot, the gravel crunching under their shoes. "That guy's bad news, T," he said, hands in his pockets. "You see the way he looked at you? Like you're some prize to win." "I can handle him," she said, unlocking her car. "He's just another loudmouth with too much money." Darius frowned. "Yeah, well, loudmouths like that don't quit easy. Watch yourself, all right?" She nodded, climbing into the driver's seat. "Always do, Dee. See you tomorrow." As she drove home through the empty streets, the radio humming some old Erykah Badu tune, Talia tried to push Mace out of her head. But those green eyes kept flashing back, wild and hungry, and she cursed under her breath. She had enough on her plate. Med school, her mom's heart condition, the bills stacking up like a deck of cards about to collapse. The last thing she needed was some washed-up tycoon screwing with her focus. Meanwhile, Mace slumped into the leather seat of his Bentley, letting his driver take the wheel. He closed his eyes, the taste of whiskey still bitter on his tongue, and saw her again. Talia, with that phoenix tattoo and that fire in her voice. He didn't know what it was about her, but he knew one thing for damn sure. He'd be back at Houston's Prime tomorrow night, and the night after that, if that's what it took. She wasn't just a challenge, she was a fucking revelation, and he was too far gone to let it go. The next night at Houston's Prime Steakhouse felt heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. The usual Friday crowd packed the place, oil execs and Stetsons, tech bros in Patagonia vests, and a few local celebrities sipping martinis at the bar. The jazz trio in the corner played a slow, sultry rendition of Take 5, the saxophone weaving through the chatter like smoke. The smell of charred steak and buttery mashed potatoes hung thick, mingling with the sharp tang of bourbon and the floral notes of expensive perfume. It was the kind of scene Mace Caldwell thrived in, a playground for a man who'd spent half his life chasing the next high. He rolled in around 9, less sloppy than the night before, but still a walking disaster. His navy blazer was wrinkled, the top 2 buttons of his white shirt undone, revealing a glimpse of tanned chest and a silver chain that glinted under the lights. He'd skipped the coke tonight, barely, but the whiskey was already in his system, courtesy of a flask he'd nursed on the drive over. His driver had dropped him off with a resigned nod, used to Mace's late-night escapades. He scanned the room, green eyes sharp, despite the haze, until they landed on her. Talia Brooks was behind the bar again, pouring a draft beer for a grizzled guy in a cowboy hat. She moved like she was born to it, quick, graceful, every motion deliberate. Her uniform hugged her curves, the black fabric catching the light just right, and that phoenix tattoo peeked out from under her sleeve as she reached for a bottle. Mace felt his pulse kick up, a thud that drowned out the saxophone for a split second. He smirked to himself and made a beeline for his usual booth, the one by the window where he could watch the city, and, more importantly, her. "Evening, darlin'," he called as he slid into the seat, loud enough to turn a few heads. "Miss me?" Talia glanced over, her expression flat. "Didn't know I was supposed to," she said, finishing the pour and sliding the beer to the cowboy with a polite smile. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked over, hips swaying just enough to make Mace's grin widen. "Whiskey again?" she asked, stopping at his table with a hand on her hip. "You know me so well already," he said, leaning back and spreading his arms along the booth. "Make it a double. And how about you sit with me this time? I'm a lot more fun than these stiffs." She didn't laugh, didn't even blink. "I'm working, Caldwell. You want company? Call one of your girlfriends." "Ouch!" he said, clutching his chest like she'd stabbed him. "You wound me, Talia. I'm a lonely man tonight. No girlfriends, no nothing. Just me and my whiskey. And you, if you'd stop playing hard to get." "Playing?" She raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "This ain't a game, big shot. I got bills to pay and a shift to finish. You want something else, order it, otherwise I got tables to clear." He chuckled, low and rough, and fished a crumpled 100 from his pocket, sliding it across the table. "For the whiskey. Keep the change, and maybe think about that drink with me later. I ain't as bad as you think." Talia picked up the bill, tucking it into her apron without breaking eye contact. "I'll get your drink," she said, turning away. "And you're exactly as bad as I think." Mace watched her go, the sway of her ponytail hypnotic. She was a firecracker, all right, sharp-tongued and untouchable, the kind of woman who'd chew up a guy like him and spit him out without breaking a sweat. And damn if that didn't make him want her more. He'd spent years surrounded by people who bent over backwards for his money, models, assistants, even his ex-wife. But Talia didn't give a shit. It was a rush, like snorting a line off a penthouse table, only better. She came back with the whiskey, setting it down with a soft thud. "Here," she said, already moving to leave. "Wait," he said, catching her wrist again. His grip was light this time, almost tentative, and she didn't pull away immediately. "You ever get tired of this? Running around for tips, dealing with assholes like me?" Talia looked down at his hand, then up at him. Her eyes were dark pools, unreadable, but piercing. "Every damn day," she said, voice quieter now. "But I don't quit. I got dreams bigger than this place." "Yeah?" He tilted his head, genuinely curious despite the buzz in his skull. "What kind of dreams?" She hesitated, like she wasn't sure he deserved an answer. Then, "Med school. Gonna be a doctor. Save people, not just serve 'em." Mace let go of her wrist, leaning back with a slow nod. "Dr. Talia, huh? That's hot. Bet you'd look good in a white coat." She rolled her eyes, but the corner of her mouth twitched, a crack in her armor. "You're a pig, you know that?" "Guilty," he said, raising his glass in a mock toast. "But I'm a pig with good taste." She shook her head and walked off, but Mace caught that almost smile, and it hit him harder than the whiskey. He sipped slow this time, savoring the burn, his mind spinning. A doctor. That tracked. She had that steady, take-no-shit vibe, like she could stitch you up and tell you to fuck off in the same breath. He wondered what else she was hiding under that cool exterior, and the thought kept him rooted to the booth. An hour later, the place was winding down. The jazz trio packed up, leaving the room to the soft hum of conversation and the clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Mace was on his third drink, nursing it now, when he saw Talia spill a glass of water on herself while clearing a table. The liquid soaked her shirt, clinging to her skin in a way that made his throat go dry. She cursed under her breath, grabbing a napkin, and headed for the staff room behind the bar. He didn't think, just moved. He slid out of the booth, weaving through the thinning crowd, and followed her. The staff room was a cramped space, lockers, a folding table, a flickering fluorescent light overhead. Talia stood by the sink, dabbing at her shirt when he pushed the door open. "Caldwell, what the hell?" she snapped, spinning to face him. "You can't be back here." "Relax," he said, stepping inside and letting the door swing shut. "Saw you get wet. Thought I'd help." She glared, holding the soaked napkin like a weapon. "I don't need your help. Get out." But Mace didn't budge. He leaned against a locker, crossing his arms, his eyes tracing the way the wet fabric outlined her curves. "You're a tough one, huh? Most girls would have taken the cash and run by now." "I ain't most girls," she said, tossing the napkin into the sink. "And I don't run from nobody." He stepped closer, the air between them thickening. "Good," he said, voice dropping low. "'Cause I like a chase." Talia held her ground, chin up, but her breath hitched as he closed the gap. He was close enough now to feel the heat off her, to catch that faint jasmine scent again. His hand brushed her arm, testing, and when she didn't pull away, he slid it to her waist, fingers grazing the damp fabric. "You're killing me, Talia," he murmured, his breath hot against her ear. "You know that?" Her eyes narrowed, but her body didn't move. "You're drunk," she said, voice steady despite the tremble he felt under his touch. "And I ain't your toy." "Not drunk enough," he said, leaning in, his lips hovering an inch from hers. "And I don't want a toy. I want you." For a heartbeat, it hung there. The tension, the heat, the pull. Then Talia shoved him back, hard, her palms slamming into his chest. "Back off, Caldwell," she said, voice like a whip. "I don't play with guys like you." Mace stumbled, catching himself on the table, and laughed, a ragged, bitter sound. "Fair enough," he said, rubbing his chest where she'd hit him. "But you felt that, didn't you? Tell me I'm wrong." She stared at him, chest rising and falling fast, her eyes blazing. "Get out," she said, pointing at the door. "Now!" He raised his hands, backing off with that damn grin still plastered on his face. "All right, Doc. I'm gone. But this ain't over." He turned and slipped out, leaving her alone in the dim room. Talia sank against the sink, her hands gripping the edge till her knuckles whitened. Her heart was pounding, and not just from anger. She cursed herself. How the hell had he gotten to her like that? She dealt with creeps before, brushed them off without a second thought. But Mace wasn't just a creep. He was a storm, wild, dangerous, and way too close for comfort. Outside, Mace lit another cigarette, the cherry glowing red in the dark. He exhaled a plume of smoke, watching it curl toward the sky. His head was a mess, but one thing was clear. Talia Brooks wasn't just another fling. She'd rattled him, cracked something open he didn't even know was there. He flicked the cigarette away and climbed into his Bentley, muttering, "Fuck me, I'm in trouble." Back inside, Darius caught Talia as she emerged from the staff room. "You okay, T?" he asked, frowning. "Saw that asshole follow you." "I'm fine," she said, brushing past him. "Just another rich prick who can't take no for an answer." Darius watched her go, unconvinced. "Yeah, well, he's got his eye on you, girl. Don't let him get too close." Talia didn't answer. She grabbed her jacket and headed for her car, the night air cooling her flushed skin. But as she drove home, Erykah Badu crooning through the speakers again, she couldn't shake him. Mace's voice, his touch, that look in his eyes. She gripped the wheel tighter, telling herself it was nothing, just a drunk guy with too much money and too little sense. But deep down she knew better, and that scared her more than anything. The following Tuesday at Houston's prime steakhouse carried a different vibe. Slower, quieter, the midweek slump settling in like a fog over the city. The weekend rush had faded, leaving behind a scattering of regulars nursing drinks and a few business types cutting deals over ribeyes. The air still smelled of seared meat and oak-aged bourbon, but the energy was dialed down, the jazz replaced by a soft R&B playlist humming through the speakers. Outside, Houston's skyline glittered against a bruised purple sky, the humidity sticking to the windows in faint beads of condensation. Talia Brooks was on the floor tonight, not behind the bar, weaving between tables with a tray balanced on one hand. She'd swapped her usual ponytail for a loose bun, a few curls escaping to frame her face, and her phoenix tattoo caught the light every time she reached to clear a plate. She was tired, bone-deep tired, after a morning of cramming for her med school exams and an afternoon arguing with the hospital about her mom's latest bill. But she kept her game face on, flashing that practice smile for the customers, even as her mind churned with numbers she couldn't make add up. Mace Caldwell hadn't shown his face since Friday, and Talia wasn't sure if she was relieved or pissed about it. She'd spent the weekend replaying that moment in the staff room, his hand on her waist, his breath against her ear, the way her body had betrayed her with that stupid flutter. She'd told herself it was nothing, just a drunk asshole getting too close. But the memory clung like cigarette smoke, impossible to shake. Part of her hoped he'd stay gone. Another part, the part she hated admitting existed, wondered if he'd meant it when he said he'd be back. The door swung open around 8, and there he was, like he'd heard her thoughts and decided to fuck with her. Mace strode in, cleaner than last time but still rough around the edges, black button-down untucked, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hair damp like he'd just stepped out of a shower. He wasn't staggering tonight, but the faint glaze in his green eyes said he'd had a drink or two before showing up. He scanned the room, spotted her, and made straight for his booth by the window, dropping into it with a lazy sprawl. Talia sighed, adjusting her tray. "Here we go," she muttered under her breath and headed over. "Well, well," Mace said as she approached, his voice a low drawl. "Dr. Talia, still slumming it with us peasants." "Whiskey?" she asked, skipping the pleasantries. Her tone was clipped, her arms crossed tight across her chest. He grinned, leaning forward on his elbows. "You remembered? Yeah, double Macallan. And maybe a smile this time, huh? You're killing my vibe with that frown." "You'll live," she said, turning to go, but his voice stopped her. "Hey, hold up," he said, softer now. "You okay? You look beat." She glanced back, caught off guard by the shift in his tone. His eyes were on her, steady and searching, and for a second she almost believed he gave a damn. "I'm fine," she said, brushing it off. "Long day. You want anything else?" "Nah," he said, settling back. "Just the drink. And you, if you change your mind about sitting with me." "Dream on," she shot back. But there was less bite in it than she meant. She walked off, feeling his gaze on her back like a physical touch. At the bar, Darius was polishing glasses, watching the exchange with a scowl. "He's back, huh?" he said as she grabbed the Macallan bottle. "Thought you scared him off for good." "Guys like him don't scare easy," Talia said, pouring the double shot with a steady hand. "They just get dumber." Darius snorted. "Yeah, well, he's got that rich boy glow tonight. Probably thinks he's gonna charm you out of that apron." Ascendant. She delivered the whiskey to Mace's table, setting it down with a little more force than necessary. "Here," she said, voice flat. "Try not to spill this one." Mace chuckled, picking up the glass and swirling it. "You're a real sweetheart, you know that. Bet you're a riot in the ER." "Bet you're a riot in rehab," she fired back, already walking away. He laughed, loud and rough, drawing a few glances from nearby tables. "Touché, darling. Touché. Talia kept moving, clearing plates and refilling waters, but she could feel him watching her. It was annoying as hell, the way he lounged there like he owned the place, which, to be fair, he probably could if he wanted to. The Caldwell name was plastered on half the high-rises downtown, a legacy built by his old man, Henry Caldwell, a ruthless bastard who'd clawed his way up from nothing to a billionaire's grave. Mace had inherited the fortune and the headlines, but from what Talia could tell, he'd done jack shit with either, except burn through them. She was wiping down a table when she caught a glimpse of him out of the corner of her eye, head tipped back, sipping slow, his throat working as he swallowed. He looked good, she'd give him that. Too good for a guy who lived like a train wreck. Broad shoulders, long legs, that messy hair begging for a comb. She shook her head, annoyed at herself for even noticing. Around 9, the place started emptying out. The R&B playlist looped back to a slow Maxwell track, the kind that made the room feel smaller, warmer. Talia was behind the bar now, restocking napkins, when Mace waved her over. She considered ignoring him, but figured he'd just keep at it. With a sigh, she grabbed a fresh glass and headed back. "Another?" she asked, nodding at his empty tumbler. "Yeah," he said, sliding it toward her. "And a question." She paused, hands on her hips. "What?" He leaned in, elbows on the table, his voice dropping low. "You ever think about me when I'm not here?" Talia blinked, then laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Yeah, I think about how quiet it is without you yapping." He grinned, unfazed. "Liar. I bet you miss me. Just a little." "You're delusional," she said, snatching the glass and turning away. But as she poured the whiskey, her mind tripped over itself. Had she thought about him? Maybe once, in that half-asleep haze before dawn, when his stupid grin flashed through her head. She shoved the thought down, hard. Back at his table, she set the drink down and started to leave, but he caught her arm. Gentler this time, his fingers warm against her skin. "Hey," he said, serious now. "You ever need anything? Money? A favor, whatever? You let me know, all right?" She pulled free, stepping back. "I don't need your handouts, Caldwell. I'm good." "Didn't say you weren't," he said, holding her gaze. "Just saying I got you, if you ever ain't." Talia stared at him, thrown by the sincerity in his voice. It didn't fit, the cocky playboy offering help like he meant it. "Why do you care?" she asked, almost to herself. Mace shrugged, taking a sip. "Dunno. You're different. Real. Makes me want to be less of a dick, I guess." She didn't know what to say to that, so she didn't. She walked off, her head spinning, and busied herself with closing duties, wiping counters, stacking chairs, anything to keep her hands moving and her mind off him. But then it happened. She was carrying a tray of dirty glasses to the kitchen when one slipped, crashing to the floor with a shatter that echoed through the room. "Shit!" she hissed, crouching to pick up the pieces. Her hands shook. Exhaustion, stress, whatever, and a shard nicked her finger, drawing a thin line of blood. Before she could react, Mace was there, kneeling beside her. "Jesus, Talia, you okay?" he said, grabbing her hand to check the cut. "I'm fine," she snapped, yanking back, but he didn't let go. "Hold still," he said, pulling a napkin from his pocket and pressing it to her finger. His touch was firm, steady, nothing like the sloppy drunk from last week. Up close, she could smell him. Whiskey, yes, but also something clean, like soap and cedar. His hands were rougher than she'd expected, calloused in a way that didn't match his penthouse life. "I said I'm fine," she repeated, softer now, her voice catching as his thumb brushed her skin. "Yeah, you're a badass. he said, looking up at her with a half smile. "But you're bleeding. Let me help." She didn't pull away this time, letting him hold the napkin there until the bleeding slowed. His face was close, too close. Those green eyes locked on hers, and her chest tightened. For a second, she forgot where they were, forgot the broken glass, forgot everything but the heat of his hand and the way he was looking at her like she was the only thing in the room. "See," he said, voice low. "Not so bad having me around." Talia swallowed, pulling her hand free and standing up fast. "Don't get used to it," she said, brushing past him to grab a broom. But her heart was racing, and not just from the cut. Mace stayed crouched there a moment, watching her sweep up the mess, then stood and tossed a few more bills on the table, way too much again, before heading for the door. "Night, Doc," he called over his shoulder. "Take care of that hand." She didn't answer, but as the door swung shut behind him, she pressed the napkin to her finger again, feeling the ghost of his touch. Darius came out from the kitchen, eyeing the scene. "He's into you, T," he said, leaning against the bar. "Big time." "Shut up, D," she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. She finished cleaning, clocked out, and drove home through the quiet streets, Maxwell's croon filling the car. But all she could think about was Mace. His hands, his eyes, that damn offer. She didn't need him. She didn't want him. So why the hell was her stomach in knots? Outside, Mace climbed into his Bentley, lighting a cigarette and staring at the steakhouse's neon sign. His head was clearer tonight, sharper, and it scared him a little. Talia wasn't just a hot waitress or a fun chase. She was something else, something that made him feel shit he hadn't felt in years. He exhaled smoke into the night, muttering, "What the fuck are you doing, Mace?" But he already knew he'd be back tomorrow, and the next night, until she told him to get lost for good, or didn't. The air at Houston's prime steakhouse felt thicker that Thursday night, heavy with the weight of a long week and the faint promise of rain outside. The crowd was sparse, mostly late-night stragglers and a few die-hard regulars sipping scotch at the bar. The R&B playlist had given way to a mellow blues track, the guitar's mournful wail curling through the room like a sigh. The chandeliers cast a golden glow over the polished wood tables, and the kitchen's hum had dulled to a murmur, the staff winding down as the clock ticked toward closing. Talia Brooks moved through it all like a shadow, her tray long since abandoned, now just wiping down surfaces and counting the minutes until she could crash. She'd barely slept the night before, too many hours hunched over textbooks, then a call from the hospital about her mom's worsening condition. Lena Brooks had been fighting heart failure for years, but the latest round of bills was a gut punch Talia couldn't dodge. She'd smiled through her shift anyway, but the exhaustion showed in the slump of her shoulders and the way her fingers lingered on the bar rag a little too long. Her bun was messier tonight, strands of curls falling loose, and her uniform felt tighter, like it was holding her together when she wasn't sure she could. Mace Caldwell hadn't shown up since Tuesday, and Talia told herself she didn't care. That moment with the broken glass, his hand on hers, that flicker of something real, had rattled her more than she'd admit. She'd spent the last 2 days shoving it down, burying it under anatomy notes and coffee runs. He was trouble, plain and simple. A rich boy with a death wish and a hard-on for anything that moved. She didn't have time for his games. But when the door swung open at 10 and he walked in, her stomach flipped anyway. He looked different tonight, still rough, but sharper. His black leather jacket hung open over a gray Henley, jeans worn but fitted, and his hair was tamed, like he'd actually run a comb through it. No stagger, no slur, just a steady stride that carried him to his booth by the window. He dropped into the seat, legs stretched out, and caught her eye across the room. A slow grin spread over his face, and Talia cursed under her breath, turning back to the bar. "Thought he'd quit?" Darius said, leaning out from the kitchen with a smirk. "Guess you're stuck with him, T." "Shut it!" she snapped, grabbing a bottle of Macallan and pouring a double without being asked. She didn't want to deal with him tonight, not with her head pounding and her nerves frayed, but ignoring him wasn't an option. He'd just keep pushing. She crossed the floor, heels clicking against the hardwood, and set the whiskey down with a thud. "Here," she said, voice flat. "Don't make a mess." Mace looked up, his grin softening into something almost warm. "Hey, Doc," he said, voice low and rough. "Missed you." "Yeah, right," she said, crossing her arms. "What's your deal tonight? You're too quiet." He chuckled, sipping the whiskey slow. "Trying to behave. Figured you'd like me better soberish." "Soberish ain't a word," she said, but the corner of her mouth twitched. "And I don't like you anyway." "Liar," he said, leaning forward. "You're still here talking to me." She rolled her eyes, turning to go, but his voice stopped her again. "Rough day?" he asked, quieter now, his eyes tracing the lines of her face. Talia paused, glancing back. "What's it to you?" "You look like you're carrying the world," he said, shrugging. "Thought I'd ask." She didn't answer right away, just stood there, arms still crossed. His gaze was steady, too steady, and it threw her off. "I'm good," she said finally, brushing it off. "Just tired." "Bullshit," he said, setting the glass down. "Something's eating you. Spill it." "Why?" she shot back, stepping closer. "So you can play hero?" "I don't need your pity, Caldwell." "Didn't say pity," he said, holding her stare. "Said spill it. Maybe I can help." Talia laughed, sharp and bitter. "Help? You? What, you gonna write me a check and call it a day?" "If that's what you need," he said, dead serious. "But I'm guessing it's more than that." She froze, caught off guard again. He wasn't slurring, wasn't smirking, just sitting there, looking at her like he actually gave a damn. It pissed her off, how he kept slipping past her walls. "You don't know shit about me," she said, voice low. "Then tell me," he said, leaning back. "What's got you so wound up?" She opened her mouth to snap at him, but something stopped her. Maybe the exhaustion, maybe the way he wasn't pushing too hard this time. She sighed, rubbing her temple. "My mom's sick," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Real sick. And the bills are drowning me. That enough for you?" Mace nodded slow, like he was piecing it together. "That's heavy," he said. "She gonna be okay?" "Dunno," Talia said, looking away. "Docs say maybe, if we can keep up with the meds, but it's a lot." He didn't say anything for a minute, just sipped his whiskey then. "I could take care of it. The bills. Say the word." Talia's head snapped back to him, eyes narrowing. "I told you I don't need your money." "Not about need," he said, setting the glass down. "About want. You want your mom better? I can make it happen." She stared at him, jaw tight. "Why? What's in it for you?" He shrugged, a ghost of a grin tugging at his lips. "Maybe I just like you, Doc. Maybe I'm tired of being a useless prick." She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't trust it. Didn't trust him. She turned away, heading back to the bar, her mind racing. Darius was there, wiping down the counter, and he caught her expression. "What did he do now?" he asked, tossing the rag aside. "Offered to pay my mom's bills," she said, voice low, like she couldn't believe it herself. Darius whistled. "Damn, that's some white knight shit. You buying it?" "Hell no," she said, grabbing a stack of coasters to sort. "He's just flexing. Thinks he can buy me like one of his cars. Maybe, Darius said, leaning closer. But he's been here every night you work, T. Guys got it bad. Got what bad? She snapped, slamming the coasters down. Darius grinned. You. He's hooked. And you're lying if you say you don't feel it too. Fuck off, D, she muttered. But her cheeks heated up, and she turned away fast. The rest of the shift dragged on, and Mace stayed put, nursing his drink, watching her. She avoided his table, letting Darius handle the refills, but she could feel his eyes on her. Steady, unyielding, like a predator sizing up prey. It wasn't just lust, though that was there too. It was something deeper, something that made her skin prickle and her guard slip. Closing time hit, and the last customers trickled out. Talia was mopping the floor near the bar when she heard the door to the staff room creak open behind her. She turned, expecting Darius, but it was Mace, jacket slung over his shoulder, standing there with that damn grin. Thought I'd say goodnight, he said, stepping closer. You didn't come back to my table. Had better things to do, she said, leaning on the mop. You're still here, why? Wanted to see you, he said, simple as that, and closed the distance between them. The room was small, the air stale with the smell of bleach and old coffee, but he filled it. His presence, his heat, the faint cedar of his cologne cutting through it all. Talia straightened, gripping the mop handle tighter. Caldwell, I'm not in the mood. Not asking you to be, he said, stopping a foot away. Just wanted to say, if you change your mind about the bills, you know where to find me. She glared, but her voice softened despite herself. Why are you pushing this? 'Cause I can, he said, eyes locked on hers. And 'cause you're worth it. The words hung there, heavy and raw, and Talia's breath caught. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, the stubble shadowing his jaw. His hand lifted, slow, brushing a stray curl from her face, and her skin burned where his fingers grazed. Don't, she said, but it came out weak, more plea than command. Don't what? He murmured, his thumb lingering on her cheek. This? He leaned in, slow enough that she could stop him, but she didn't. His lips brushed hers, soft at first, testing, then harder, hungry, like he'd been starving for it. Talia froze, then melted, her hands dropping the mop to grip his shirt, pulling him closer. It was a mistake, a fucking disaster, but it felt good. Too good. His mouth hot and demanding, his hands sliding to her waist, pressing her against the lockers. Then reality crashed in. She shoved him back, gasping, her lips tingling. Get out, she said, voice shaking. Now. Mace stumbled, breathing hard, his eyes dark with want. Talia! Out! She yelled, pointing at the door. He nodded, running a hand through his hair, and backed off. All right, he said, voice rough. I'm gone. But you kissed me back, Doc. Don't forget that. He slipped out, leaving her alone with the echo of her own heartbeat. Talia sank against the lockers, sliding to the floor, her hands pressed to her face. What the fuck? She whispered, over and over, until it was just noise. She'd crossed a line, and she hated herself for it, hated him for making her want it. Outside, Mace lit a cigarette with shaky hands, the flame flickering in the damp night air. His lips still tasted like her, sweet, sharp, addictive as hell. He exhaled smoke into the dark, muttering, You're screwed, man. He was in deep, deeper than he'd ever been, and he didn't know how to climb out, or if he even wanted to. Talia drove home in silence, the radio off, the streets blurring past. Her mind was a war zone, anger, guilt, desire crashing together until she couldn't tell one from the other. She didn't know what Mace was playing at, But she knew one thing. He'd gotten under her skin, and she wasn't sure she could get him out. Friday night at Houston's prime steakhouse crackled with energy, the weekend crowd flooding in like a tide. The air buzzed with laughter, the clink of glasses, and the sizzle of steaks hitting the grill. The chandeliers threw golden light across the room, catching on diamond earrings and Rolexes, while the R&B playlist pumped out a bass-heavy beat that pulsed through the hardwood floor. Outside, Houston's downtown glowed, a sprawl of steel and neon against a sky streaked with storm clouds. The humidity hung thick, promising rain, but inside, it was all heat and noise, a perfect Friday night chaos. Talia Brooks was in the thick of it, weaving through the crowd with a tray of martinis balanced on one hand. Her bun was tight tonight, curls locked down, and her uniform clung to her like a second skin, the black fabric catching every eye she passed. She was on autopilot, smiling at the right moments, dodging the occasional drunk hand, dropping off drinks with a clipped "here you go." But her head wasn't in it. Last night's kiss with Mace Caldwell had left her raw, a wound she couldn't stop picking at. She'd barely slept, replaying it over and over, his mouth on hers, the way her body had betrayed her, the way she'd wanted more. She hated him for it, hated herself more, and the lack of sleep showed in the shadows under her eyes. Mace hadn't shown up yet, and Talia wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. She'd spent the day convincing herself she didn't care, didn't want him back, didn't need his money or his bullshit. But every time the door swung open, her eyes flicked to it, and her stomach tightened. She was mid-shift, delivering a tray of appetizers to a table of loud tech guys when it happened. The door opened, and there he was. Mace walked in like he owned the place. Hell, maybe he did in spirit. He'd cleaned up tonight. A tailored black blazer over a crisp white shirt, jeans dark and fitted, hair slicked back, but still a little wild. No stagger, no glassy eyes, just a steady, predatory stride that cut through the crowd. He spotted her immediately, those green eyes locking on like a missile, and a slow grin spread across his face. Talia's tray wobbled, just for a second, before she steadied it and turned away, pretending she hadn't seen him. He made for his booth by the window, dropping into it with a casual sprawl, and waved her over. She ignored him, handing off the appetizers and heading to the bar instead. Darius was there, mixing a cocktail, and he caught her expression. "Lover boy's back," he said, smirking as he shook the shaker. "You gonna hide all night, T?" "Not hiding," she snapped, grabbing a rag to wipe the counter. "Just busy." "Yeah, right," he said, pouring the drink with a flourish. "He's staring holes in your back, girl. What did he do last night to get you this wound up?" "Nothing," she said, too quick, and Darius raised an eyebrow. "Bullshit," he said, leaning closer. "Spill it, or I'll ask him myself." Talia glared, but her shoulders slumped. "He kissed me," she muttered, barely audible over the music. "In the staff room, and I didn't stop him right away." Darius whistled low. "Damn, T. You're in deep now." "Shut up," she said, tossing the rag at him. "It was a mistake. Won't happen again." "Uh-huh," he said, catching the rag with a grin. "Tell that to him. He's still waiting." She glanced over her shoulder. Mace was watching, one hand resting on his empty table, the other tapping a rhythm against his thigh. He waved again, more insistent this time, and she sighed. "Fine," she said, grabbing the Macallan bottle. "Let's get this over with." She crossed the floor, dodging a giggling group of women in stilettos, and stopped at his booth. "Whiskey?" she asked, voice cold, setting the bottle down hard. "Hey, Doc," he said, grinning up at her. "Missed you last night." "Doubt it," she said, pouring the double shot with a steady hand. "You were probably too drunk to remember." "Nah," he said, taking the glass and swirling it. Sober enough to know you kissed me back. Talia's jaw tightened, her hand freezing mid-pour. That was a mistake, she said, low and sharp. Don't get it twisted. Twisted? He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his voice dropping to a rumble. Felt pretty straight to me. You wanted it, Talia. Don't lie. She slammed the bottle down, the thud cutting through the noise. You don't know what I want, Caldwell. Back off. He didn't flinch, just sipped his whiskey slow, eyes never leaving hers. I know you're pissed, he said. And I know you're scared. But I ain't backing off till you tell me you don't feel it too. Feel what? She snapped, stepping closer, her voice rising. Your ego? Your money? 'Cause that's all you got. Bullshit, he said, standing up now, towering over her. The booth creaked as he moved, and the air between them crackled. You felt it last night, same as me. Heat. Real shit. Stop pretending you didn't. Talia's chest heaved, her fists clenching at her sides. You're delusional, she said, but her voice shook, and he caught it. Am I? He said, stepping closer, close enough that she could smell the cedar on him, the whiskey on his breath. Then why you shaking, Doc? She shoved him hard, her palms slamming into his chest. Get out of my face, she hissed, and he stumbled back, catching himself on the table. All right, he said, raising his hands, that grin still flickering. I'll chill, but I ain't wrong. She turned away, storming back to the bar, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear the music. Darius was waiting, arms crossed, a knowing look on his face. That went well, he said, dry as hell. Fuck him, she muttered, grabbing a tray and heading to another table, anything to keep moving. But Mace didn't let up. He stayed put, sipping slow, watching her work. Around 11, the crowd thinned, and the vibe shifted. Slower, heavier, the blues track giving way to a sultry sod song that wrapped the room in velvet. Talia was clearing a table near the kitchen when she felt him behind her. Close, too close, his shadow falling over the plates she was stacking. Caldwell, she said, not turning around. I told you to back off. I did, he said, voice low, right at her ear. Now I'm back. She spun, ready to snap, but he was already moving, grabbing her wrist, gentle but firm, and pulling her toward the staff room. What the hell? She started. But he pushed the door open and tugged her inside, letting it slam shut behind them. The room was dim, the fluorescent light flickering, the air thick with the smell of bleach and stale coffee. Talia yanked her wrist free, stepping back until she hit the lockers. You lost your damn mind? She said, voice shaking with fury. Maybe, he said, closing the gap, his hands braced on either side of her, pinning her without touching. But I'm not losing you. She laughed, harsh and jagged. Losing me? You never had me, asshole. Liar, he said, leaning in, his face inches from hers. You're in my head, Talia. Every damn second. And I'm in yours, too. Her breath hitched, her hands pressing flat against the lockers. You're drunk, she said, weaker now, her eyes darting to his lips. Not tonight, he said, and then he kissed her, hard, hungry, no hesitation this time. His mouth claimed hers, one hand sliding to her waist, the other tangling in her hair, pulling her bun loose. Talia gasped against him, her hands gripping his shirt, then shoving, then pulling again, caught in a war she was losing fast. He pressed her against the lockers, his body flush with hers, the heat of him searing through her uniform. She kissed him back, fierce, desperate, her nails digging into his shoulders. It was messy, raw, all teeth and tongue, and it set her on fire. His hand slid lower, cupping her hip, and she arched into him, a moan slipping out before she could stop it. Then the door banged open. Talia, you... Darius froze, the words dying in his throat as he took in the scene. Mace pinning her to the lockers, her hair wild, lips swollen. "What the fuck?" Talia shoved Mace off, stumbling back, her chest heaving. It's not," she started, but he cut her off. "Save it," he said, voice cold. "You're better than this, T." He turned and walked out, the door slamming shut. Mace ran a hand through his hair, breathing hard. "Shit," he muttered, looking at her. "You okay?" "No," she snapped, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Get out! Now!" "Talia! Out!" she yelled, pointing at the door, her voice cracking. He nodded, jaw tight, and left without another word. Talia sank to the floor, her head in her hands, the taste of him still on her lips. She was shaking. Anger, shame, desire twisting into a knot she couldn't untangle. Darius had seen it, and that made it real. Too real. She'd let Mace in, let him break her rules, and now she was paying for it. Outside, Mace lit a cigarette, the flame trembling in his hands. His heart was racing, his body still humming from her touch. He'd fucked up, pushed too hard too fast, but he couldn't regret it. That kiss, her fire, it was worth every second of the fallout. He exhaled smoke into the night, muttering, "She's gonna kill me," and climbed into his Bentley, already plotting his next move. Talia stayed there, curled against the lockers, until the tears came. Hot, silent, furious. She didn't cry for him, she told herself. She cried for her mom, for the bills, for the mess her life was becoming. But deep down, she knew he was part of it now, part of her, and that scared her more than anything. Saturday night at Houston's prime Steakhouse was a full-on assault of sound and light, the weekend peaking in a roar of excess. The place was packed, tables spilling over with oil tycoons and bolo ties, tech millionaires in slim-fit suits, and a gaggle of influencers snapping selfies with overpriced cocktails. The chandeliers blazed, casting a warm glow over the chaos, while the kitchen churned out platters of sizzling porterhouses and truffle fries, the air thick with smoke and spice. Outside, Houston's skyline shimmered through a haze of rain that had finally broken, streaking the windows with silver. The R&B playlist thumped hard, Beyoncé's voice cutting through the din, and the energy was electric, wild, reckless, alive. Talia Brooks was a ghost in the storm, moving through the crowd with a tray of empty glasses, her face a mask of control. Last night's mess with Mason Caldwell, and Darius walking in on it, had left her hollowed out, a raw nerve wrapped in a tight bun and a black uniform. She hadn't slept worth a damn, her eyes red-rimmed behind a layer of concealer, her mind a loop of that kiss, Darius's disgust, and the bills piling up on her kitchen counter. She'd avoided Darius all shift, sticking to the floor while he stayed behind the bar, his silence louder than any lecture. She didn't blame him for being pissed. She was pissed too, at herself, at Mace, at everything. Mace rolled in late, past 10, cutting through the crowd like a blade. He'd gone all out tonight. Charcoal suit, crisp white shirt open at the collar, hair slicked back but starting to fall loose. He wasn't drunk, not yet, but the tension in his shoulders said he'd been drinking something before he got here. His green eyes scanned the room, landing on Talia with a heat that made her stomach drop. He headed for his booth, dropping into it with a predator's grace, and waved her over like nothing had happened, like he hadn't turned her world upside down in that staff room. She ignored him, handing off her tray to a busboy and heading for the kitchen instead. Her hands shook as she pushed through the swinging doors, the heat and noise of the grill hitting her like a wall. She leaned against a counter, breathing hard, trying to pull herself together. "Get it together, T," she muttered. pressing her palms to her eyes. She couldn't face him. Not tonight. Not after last night. But Mace wasn't the type to wait. He followed her, slipping through the kitchen doors like he belonged there, ignoring the cook's confused stares. "Talia!" he called, voice cutting through the clatter of pans. She spun, her back to the counter, fists clenched. "What the hell, Caldwell? You can't be back here." "Needed to see you," he said, stepping closer, his boots loud against the tile. "You're dodging me." "Yeah, 'cause I don't want to deal with you," she snapped, crossing her arms tight. "Leave me alone." "Not happening," he said, stopping a foot away, his eyes dark and unyielding. "We need to talk." "Talk?" She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You mean fuck up my life some more? Pass." He flinched, just barely, but kept his ground. "I fucked up last night, all right. Pushed too hard." "I'm sorry." Talia stared, thrown by the apology. "Sorry don't fix shit," she said, voice shaking. "Darius saw us. He thinks I'm some dumbass falling for your game." "Darius can kiss my ass," Mace said, jaw tight. "This ain't about him. It's about us." "Us?" She stepped forward, shoving a finger into his chest. "There's no us, Caldwell. You're a train wreck, and I'm not your next crash." He caught her wrist, gentle but firm, holding her there. "You're wrong," he said, voice low and rough. "I'm a mess, yeah. But you're the first thing in years that's made me want to clean it up." She yanked free, stepping back, her heart pounding. "Don't," she said, quieter now. "Don't say shit you don't mean." "I mean it," he said, closing the gap again. "You're under my skin, Talia. I can't shake you. And I don't want to." Her breath hitched, her resolve cracking under the weight of his words. She wanted to scream, to shove him out, but her body wouldn't move. His hand lifted, slow, brushing her cheek, and she flinched but didn't pull away. "Mace," she whispered, a warning, a plea. He kissed her then, soft at first, tentative, like he was asking permission. She stiffened, hands fisting at her sides, but then she broke, kissing him back with a hunger that scared her. It wasn't like last night. No rush, no chaos, just a slow burn that melted her defenses. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and she let him, her hands sliding up his chest, gripping his jacket. The kitchen door banged open again, and they sprang apart. It was Darius, his face a storm cloud. "You kidding me, T?" he said, voice cold as ice. "Again?" "D, wait," she started, but he shook his head. "Nah, I'm done," he said, turning away. "You want to throw yourself at this asshole, that's on you." He stormed out, leaving a silence that pressed down like a weight. Talia wiped her mouth, stepping back from Mace, her eyes wet. "See?" she said, voice breaking. "This is what you do. You ruin shit." "Talia." Mace reached for her, but she slapped his hand away. "Get out," she said, pointing at the door. "I mean it this time." He nodded, jaw tight, and left without a fight. Talia sank against the counter, tears spilling hot down her cheeks. She was done. Done with him. Done with herself. She grabbed her phone from her apron, texting Darius. "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" No reply. Out in the dining room, Mace slumped into his booth, ordering a double whiskey he didn't touch. His head was a war zone. Guilt, want, something bigger he couldn't name. He'd meant every word, but he'd fucked it up anyway. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Frank Russo, his company's chairman. "Board meeting Monday. Be there, or you're out." He cursed, tossing the phone down. The real world was closing in, and he was losing grip on the one thing he actually cared about. The night dragged on, and Talia kept her distance, working the floor like a machine. Around midnight, she stepped outside for air, the rain soaking her jacket as she leaned against the brick wall. She was lighting a rare cigarette when her phone rang. Her mom's nurse. "Ms. Brooks," the voice said, tight with urgency. "Your mom's taken a turn. You need to get here now." Talia's heart stopped. She dropped the cigarette, running for her car, the rain blurring her vision. She didn't think about Mace. Didn't think about Darius. Just drove. The hospital's lights looming like a beacon in the dark. Lena was all she had left, and she couldn't lose her too. Mace saw her go, peeling out of the lot like a bat out of hell. He stood, grabbing his jacket, and followed. Instinct, not plan. He didn't know where she was headed, but he knew something was wrong, and he wasn't letting her face it alone. His Bentley roared after her Honda, cutting through the rain-slick streets. At the hospital, Talia burst into the ER, soaked and frantic. The nurse led her to Lena's room. Tubes, monitors, her mom's frail frame lost in a sea of white sheets. "She's stable now," the nurse said, but it was close. "Her heart's failing faster than we thought." Talia sank into a chair, holding Lena's hand, tears streaming silent. "I'm here, Mama," she whispered. "I got you." The door creaked open behind her, and she turned. Mace, dripping wet, standing there with a look she'd never seen before. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Saw you leave," he said, stepping in. "Figured it was bad. Didn't want you alone." She stared, too tired to fight. "She's dying," she said, the words breaking free. "And I can't stop it." Mace knelt beside her, hesitant, then took her other hand. "You don't have to," he said, quiet but firm. "But I can help. The bills, the meds, let me take that off you." Talia pulled away, shaking her head. "I told you." "Not a handout," he cut in, voice fierce. "A lifeline. For her. For you. I'm not asking for anything back." She looked at him, really looked, and saw something new. Not the playboy, not the drunk, but a man who'd followed her into hell because he cared. Her walls cracked, just a little. "Okay," she whispered, barely audible. "For her." He nodded, squeezing her hand, and stayed there, silent, as the rain pounded outside. Hours later, Lena stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Talia?" she rasped, then saw Mace. "Who's this?" Talia swallowed, glancing at him. "A friend," she said, the words strange on her tongue. Mace smiled, small and real. "Mason Caldwell, ma'am. Nice to meet you." Lena's gaze sharpened, a flicker of recognition. "Caldwell," she murmured, voice weak but hard. "I know that name." Talia frowned, but before she could ask, Lena's eyes closed again, her breathing steadying. Mace stood, stepping back. "I'll handle the bills," he said. "You stay with her." He left, and Talia watched him go, a storm of questions brewing. Caldwell. Why did that hit her mom like that? She pushed it down, focusing on Lena's hand in hers, but the seed was planted. Outside, Mace lit a cigarette, the rain soaking his suit. His phone buzzed again. Frank, threatening the board vote. He ignored it, staring at the hospital doors. He'd meant it. No strings, no games. But Lena's reaction gnawed at him, a shadow he couldn't place. He exhaled smoke into the night, muttering, "What the hell have I stepped into?" Talia stayed by Lena's side, the monitors beeping steady, her mind a tangle of relief and dread. Mace was in deeper now, too deep, and whatever her mom knew about Caldwell was a bomb waiting to blow. But for now she held on, whispering, "We're gonna be okay, Mama," and prayed it wasn't a lie.